Hello, I'm Madeleine Murtagh. I'm here as the chair of the ALEC, the ALSPAC Law and Ethics Group, or Ethics and Law Group, but we call ourselves the ALEC. I'm going to talk about, very briefly describe ALSPAC to you. Many of you know ALSPAC already. I'll talk about the ALEC and its remit, its history. I'll also talk about the ALEC in the context of the changing relationship of science to society, because that has some very material effects on how ALEC is developing, evolving in the world as we are. And I'll talk about the way that ALEC has been evolving, and talk about the co-governance that we're engaging in at the moment in stakeholder relations. So ALSPAC, oh, that isn't a very good picture on the big screen. ALSPAC is a population-based cohort, 14,000 pregnant women in 1991 and 92 were asked to engage in the study, to be part of the study. Those first children are now 21, 22, 23, and there are in fact now 4 generations of the study. So grandparents have been recruited, the mothers were already recruited, fathers have been recruited, and their biological fathers, as well as, I guess, social fathers, stepfathers perhaps. We've started seeing the Cocoa 90s, the children of the 90s. There are about 200 and something young children, the oldest being 7, and many babies of those first children. And we will be recruiting their partners as well. We've also been recruiting the siblings of those original cohort members. So there's a lot of annual, regular collection of all sorts of demographic health information. There's an annual questionnaire every year to each of the generations. There are clinics every few years, and there are numerous sub-studies that are ongoing all the time. Apparently, we've asked our cohort 400 million questions. So the way that governance happens is through this horrific diagram. There is... no. Oh dear, I've done something bad. Okay, the one in the middle that says ALSPAC Executive Committee, that's the operational heart of ALSPAC. The running of the team, or of the cohort, happens at the management team. There is a steering group of the work program leads who come together on a biannual basis to discuss direction, strategic development, etc. There's an independent advisory group, and then we have the ALEC. We also have, in the small box down the right-hand side, the OCAP. Once was called the TAP, the Teenage Advisory Panel. They decided that they'd grown up and they were no longer teenagers. They couldn't be called the Teenage Advisory Panel anymore. And they decided, they chose for themselves the name OC, the Original Cohort Advisory Panel. Now, this has been established, this stakeholder involvement has been established in ALSPAC for a very long time. Since the young people were, I think, 13 or 14, it was established. So there's a long history of engagement within ALSPAC. And that gave me, if you like, a license to take that further within the ALEC. So it's history. The ALEC has been part of ALSPAC right from the outset. There always was an ethics committee. If you know the English history, so I'm talking to those of you who are in the UK, there really wasn't much of an ethics infrastructure until this century. So the ALSPAC Ethics Committee did all of the work that you would expect an ethics committee to do. It currently and always has comprised clinicians, researchers, people with legal expertise, lay people, and it's always included study participants. Once TAP came into existence, young participants were included, but it always included a study mother and a study father. And in fact, the study mother, I think, has been there from the inception of the committee. But why? I mean, given that this morning we heard talk about Biobank's committee being not an ethics committee, explicitly not an ethics committee, why would ALSPAC maintain an ethics committee? But one of the key things, and I think Bartha pointed to it, is the nature of these cohorts as longitudinal. NHS research ethics committees often don't understand what we do. They don't understand the very special relationship that has evolved and is part of maintaining trust with the participants in a cohort. And therefore, what goes to an ethics committee that takes on clinical research, all sorts of different research, may not be seen, they may simply not have the experience, or they may not see the particular unique properties that attend to a cohort study. Sometimes they do, but sometimes we find that actually there can be problems introduced by RECs, and we had an example of that recently. The remit has remained ethical approvals. So whilst all of those approvals that need to go to NHS REC, anything to do with human tissue, imaging, prisoners, I don't actually think we have any prisoners, but should we have prisoners, that should go to REC as well. All of those will go through the normal process. They come to ALEC first, or to a subcommittee of ALEC to get some input, but by and large they go through the usual REC processes. Any other approvals we take and we do as full ethics approvals. So any new studies, any new questionnaires, any qualitative studies, all of these come through the ALEC. The remit is to ensure sound ethical review of ALSPAC, keep making sure that it is, it keeps up with any international policy changes, legislation, national changes, policy changes and legislation, and it's to oversee the research integrity and ethics. It's not that different to Biobank, except that we have a specific remit to do ethical approvals. But ALEC is changing, and I hinted at that. ALEC is changing because the relationship of science to society is changing. If you look, for instance, at the way that the EU funding for social science within scientists of science has changed. It was called Science and Society. It changed to Science in Society, and now the most recent Horizon 2020 is Science with and for Society. There is a qualitative stepwise change towards a different perspective, a different view of stakeholders in the very broadest of senses, not just participants, not just researchers, research users, industry, funders, whomever you might think of. So one of the guiding principles, if you like, is what is called responsible research and innovation. It promotes being anticipatory, thinking forward, being reflexive. We heard Graham Laurie talking about reflexivity. It's deliberative, it's responsive, it's inclusive. It talks to mutuality and reciprocity. And we've seen much in the literature about these sorts of principles. So what might that look like in ALEC? When I became the chair of ALEC, I came in and found that there'd been a recent recruitment of the young participants, the original cohort, to take up what was then 2 places on the ALEC. That had been the tradition. 1 place for a mother, 1 place for a father, and 2 places for the young people. But there were 13 who'd applied. And I thought, all this enthusiasm, I was loath to just ignore it. So I thought, right, let's get them together, feed them pizza, see what happens. So we did that. We got them together. We became what is now known as the PreAlec. It's a very ugly name, but that works. They've adopted it. Essentially, what happened at that first meeting, I said to them, look, you've all come here. You're all really interested. I don't want to say just 2 of you come. Why don't we do a bit of an experiment? Why don't we see what happens if you start to become more involved in the processes of the ALEC? What happens if we take seriously that you want to be part of the ethics and governance of the cohort of which you were a part? So over the period of a year, it's nearly a year now, we have done just that. Now, it's called the PreAlec because we tend to meet about a week before the ALEC meeting. Good engagement practice means that you give people who don't have the same relationship of power to the suits if you want to call us that, in the room. So we spend a couple of hours, always have pizza. I was told at the beginning, feed us and we will come, and they do. So we spend an hour or two looking at the documents that are coming up. They have a chance to sort of practice, to try out, well, what are ethical issues and what are just issues that are, annoyances because somebody's left too many typos in or things like that. And they also particularly have a very clear eye to what they expect as participants. So they understand that the trusting relationship that's been built up is in part because there's a sort of a corporate feel to what they receive. They have expectations about what will and won't come to them and what they will and won't be expected to do. And they're very clear about that. So the professionals. You might wonder what the professionals thought about all of this. Well, for the most part, they were very professional and very welcoming and they did all the right things. And for the most part, although there was some unease about it, only one person actually left because of this change. Other people have left because they've had to move on to other committees, effectively. But only one person of the very original group who were the ALEC were so upset about what had been going on, this great change to their authority and their power, that they couldn't stay. And, that happens, and, it's something we have to accept. But others of the members who had been of those original group, they stayed, which was really quite heartening and quite a relief. So let me just read to you. The group has been an absolute delight. I have had more fun with that group than I have had doing almost anything in my academic career, and it's just been great, and I would recommend it to anyone. One of the things that we've decided to do, one of the participants suggested it. They said, we've been doing this now for nearly a year. Do you think anyone else would be interested? And I said, yes. So they want to write a paper. So we've started gathering narratives about their experience so that we can construct a paper of their experience. So they will write it, they will all be authors, I'll be there supporting them to do it, but they will write the paper. Well, we'll probably write a lot of it, but a lot of the words will come from them. So some of the things that they have said in these narratives, initially we couldn't always be sure we'd struck the right balance of contribution to the ALEC, but with support and plenty of news on how decisions had actually been implemented, we've learned from our experiences. Then another, sometimes the more experienced members of the committees have said that in the past, we'd try and think about how a particular issue would come across to participants, but we never really were able to do it. And of course now they can. And then another, I believe coming up to our first birthday, if you can call it that, we have gained and are gaining increasing levels of respect from the more established members of the committee. I think everyone knows that we're here to stay and we're not just a flash in the pan. We have good working relationships, which I believe is key for this type of committee, and everybody listens to others' contributions, and if clarification is needed, then it's sought. So that's what ALEC looks like now, and last week we finalised our new terms of reference and agreed that half of the committee will be made up of professional members, the usual suspects, and half will be made up of participant members. Now, ultimately, that may include siblings, it may include grandparents, it may include, once they're old enough, the Cocoa 90s. But for the moment, it includes a mother, a father, and a number of young participants. So in that regard, we're looking at co-governance, but that's not enough. Not satisfied. We are actually going a little bit further. The points that Graham made about representativeness and about the potential for being tokenistic is really, really well taken. And one of the things that we don't want to do, it's known in engagement literature that that's just not enough. You can't just take one or two people and bring them in. It's not enough. So one of the things that we've been doing within the Data to Knowledge group is developing a program of work called the EchoDe project. EchoDe stands for Employing Conceptual Schema for Policy and Translation Engagement in Research. Awful acronym, but EchoDe to listen. And effectively what EchoDe does is use a mind mapping software to get people to interact either online, face-to-face, We've done an EchoDe with P3G. We're doing an EchoDe in the supermarket next weekend. You can do it anywhere, literally. Once we've got those contributions together, we then use standard qualitative methods to analyse them in a thematic way. We construct a conceptual schema and then use that, we check that obviously with the contributors, and we use that then to feed into policy, make recommendations, etc. In ALSPAC, we're taking this seriously. We are doing, at the moment, we have started a series of qualitative studies on commercialisation. These are not all in place yet, but commercialisation, return of results, recall by genotype, and data sharing. So we want to know, one of the things about EchoDe is we use existing evidence. Qualitative research is existing evidence. We don't have that at this point with these. The empirical work isn't there, so we're doing some of it. Then we'll go out and we'll run these EchoDe exercises. So what does an EchoDe look like? Here is our artist representation. I don't think you're going to be able to read any of it, and my apologies for that. This is a draft of the EchoDe that we've done on trust and data sharing in collaboration with P3G and with BioShare. It's just come to a close in terms of its input, so I can't offer you the opportunity to input, but we will be doing our analysis of these and then feeding it back to the community. If you're interested, obviously get in touch, and then we'll write it up and hopefully, this is a pilot. We will refine the methods as we go on. So in summary, ALEC is responding to what we see as a new relationship of science to society. And we're responding by bringing in the participants, but also going out further to them. We haven't gone out to the public, and that may well be something to do, but at the moment, we've got our hands full. Thank you.